I was just thinking about the great times I've had playing this game and just me being in Miami. I'm always trying to find like the good in everything, man.
On February 16, 2026, the Miami Dolphins released Tyreek Hill, wiping over $56 million in cap space and ending his 4-year run. But the real shock wasn't the move, it was Hill's reaction. In this video, I'll break down how a $120 million extension vanished and how his response changes everything. The release. On February 16, 2026, the Miami Dolphins released wide receiver Tyreek Hill. The move was not isolated. Within the same hour, the organization also let go of edge rusher Bradley Chubb, offensive guard James Daniels, and wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. 4 veterans, gone in 60 minutes. Together, the cuts cleared over $56 million in salary cap space, dragging the franchise from roughly $17.4 million over the projected cap to approximately $13 million under it. Hill's release alone saved the Dolphins approximately $22.8 million. His 4-year, $120 million extension, signed immediately after his 2022 trade from the Kansas City Chiefs, a deal that involved a first-round pick, a second-round pick, 2 fourth-round picks, and a 6th-round pick, had $11 million set to become fully guaranteed in the near future. The Dolphins acted before that guarantee kicked in. The team officially cited a failed physical as part of the reasoning, but the financial reality behind it was blunt. Hill was carrying a $51.1 million cap hit heading into 2026. For a team in full rebuilding mode, that number was a non-starter. These moves marked the first major decisions by new general manager John Eric Sullivan, who had replaced Chris Grier following a dismal 7-10 season in 2025 and the firing of head coach Mike McDaniel in January 2026. Jeff Hafley was brought in as the new head coach. Sullivan wasted no time making his intentions clear. This was not a retooling. This was not a tweak. This was a full-scale rebuild for a franchise that had not won a single playoff game since the year 2000. 26 years of playoff drought stretching across multiple coaching staffs, front offices, and ownership decisions had produced nothing but accumulating frustration. The star acquisitions, the blockbuster trades, the record-setting contracts, none of it had moved the needle where it mattered most. Hill's time in Miami was supposed to change all of that. When the Dolphins acquired him from the Chiefs in March 2022, the expectation was clear. Pair his speed with Tua Tagovailoa's accuracy and Mike McDaniel's scheme, and you have a Super Bowl caliber offense. The early returns suggested it might work. In his first season 2022, Hill delivered 119 receptions for 1,710 yards and 7 touchdowns, numbers that validated every penny of the extension and every piece of draft capital that had been spent to acquire him. In 2023, he was even better, leading the entire league with 1,799 receiving yards and 13 touchdowns on another 119 catches, earning consecutive All-Pro honors. He was the most explosive wide receiver in the NFL. The speed was otherworldly, the kind of acceleration that turned a 5-yard slant into a 70-yard touchdown, the kind of top-end velocity that forced safeties to abandon their assignments and sprint to the deep third of the field before the ball was even snapped. The production was historic, and the Dolphins still could not get past the first round of the playoffs. They were bounced in the wild card round in January 2024 by the Chiefs, Hill's former team, ending their postseason run before it ever gained momentum. The 2024 season brought a noticeable decline. Hill's numbers dropped to 81 receptions, 959 yards, and 6 touchdowns, dragged down by a wrist injury he played through against medical advice. His yards per reception average fell. His contested catch rate dropped. Defenses that had once been terrified of his deep speed began sitting on intermediate routes, daring Tagovailoa to throw underneath. The scheme that had been designed around Hill's top-end velocity started to malfunction when that velocity was no longer available at full capacity. Then came 2025, and with it, the play that changed everything. On September 29th, against the New York Jets, Hill suffered a dislocated left knee with tears to his ACL, meniscus, and patellar tendon. Surgery was performed on October 1st. His 2025 season was finished after 4 games, 21 catches, 265 yards, 1 touchdown. On March 1st, 2026, he turned 32 years old. To put that trajectory in context, Hill went from 1,799 receiving yards in 2023 to 265 yards in 2025. From 13 touchdowns to 1, from leading the league to barely appearing in it. The body that had once made him the most feared weapon in the sport was now the primary reason for his departure. The knee, the wrist, the hamstrings, the oblique, the injuries had stacked on top of each other like geological layers, each one compressing the one beneath it until the foundation cracked. But here is where the narrative veered away from what you might expect, because Tyreek Hill did not disappear. He did not retreat into silence. He did not fire off passive-aggressive messages or cryptic social media posts designed to stir controversy. Within hours of the release becoming public, Hill posted a detailed message on Instagram that read more like a farewell letter than a grievance. He wrote that every chapter of his life had taught him something, and that this chapter taught him leadership, resilience, and gratitude. He said the love he had for the game was unexplainable. He thanked the Dolphins organization, his teammates, his coaches, and the fans. He wrote that from the moment he landed in Miami, he felt love. Then his tone shifted. He wrote that the cheetah doesn't slow down, ever. That this offseason, for the first time, he was all the way turned up and locked in, focused. He told everyone wondering what was next to just wait on it. He signed off with a promise and a rebirth declaration. The cheetah will be back, born again. And then, because this is Tyreek Hill and the man contains multitudes, he went live on Twitch and cracked a joke. He said, "I got fired on my day off," a reference to the movie Friday, delivering the kind of punchline that only works when you know the person behind it is processing something real beneath the humor. For the first time in his 10-year career, Tyreek Hill was an unrestricted free agent. Every previous stop, Kansas City, Miami, had been dictated by trades and extensions, by organizations deciding where he would play and for how much. Now, for the first time, the decision belonged to him. The injuries that changed everything. Tyreek Hill's body had been sending warning signals for years before the knee finally gave out in September 2025. The injury history stretched back to his time in Kansas City, and it followed a trajectory that climbed steadily in severity, brick by brick eroding the aura of indestructibility that had surrounded the fastest player in professional football. In Kansas City, the ailments were tolerable. A sternum fracture in September 2019 kept him out for 4 games. Hamstring strains appeared in August 2020, December 2020, and again in August 2021. 3 soft tissue setbacks across 2 calendar years, each one a flare-up that healed but left behind a residue of vulnerability. A quad strain surfaced in October 2021 and was re-aggravated the following week, forcing him to manage 2 lower body issues simultaneously. A heel. Bruise showed up during warm-ups in January 2022, the kind of nagging ailment that barely makes the injury report but quietly affects every step, every cut, every explosive movement on the field. When Hill arrived in Miami, the first significant injury came in December 2023, an ankle sprain that cost him 1 game against the Jets. Routine. Expected, unremarkable in the grand scheme of a 17-game NFL season. But what followed next was anything but routine. In August 2024, during joint practices, Hill tore the scapholinate ligament in his left wrist. The scapholinate ligament connects 2 of the small bones in the wrist and is critical for grip strength, ball security, and the ability to extend the arm under contact. Doctors told him in clear terms, shut it down, get surgery, and miss the season. Hill refused. He chose to play through it, absorbing the consequences in every phase of his game. His 81 receptions, 959 yards, and 6 touchdowns in 2024 represented his lowest output since 2019. The catches that used to look effortless now required visible adjustment. The ball security that had been instinctive now demanded conscious compensation. The deep routes that once ended with Hill pulling away from defenders now ended with contested catches and incomplete passes. The surgeries came in the offseason. Ligament repair in February 2025, screw removal in May. The recovery timeline for scapholinate reconstruction is notoriously unpredictable. Some patients regain full function in months, while others deal with chronic stiffness and grip weakness that lingers for years. For a wide receiver whose livelihood depends on catching a football thrown at 60 miles per hour while sprinting at top speed and absorbing hits from 220-pound defensive backs, any residual limitation in the wrist is the difference between hauling in a catch and watching the ball slip through. An oblique strain in training camp in August 2025 further disrupted his preparation for the new season. Hill entered the 2025 regular season behind schedule, his body trying to recover from 1 major surgery while absorbing the physical demands of another preseason. Then came week 4, September 29th, 2025. Jets at Dolphins. The play itself was unremarkable until the moment Hill went down. He was tackled, and when he tried to push himself up, his left leg did not respond the way it was supposed to. He looked down and saw it bent at an unnatural angle. The diagnosis was catastrophic: a dislocated left knee with tears to the ACL, meniscus, patellar tendon, and additional ligaments. Surgery was performed 2 days later on October 1st. 21 catches and 265 yards were all that remained of his 2025 season. Hill spoke about the moment on a podcast with a former teammate.
When I got tackled, I immediately tried to get up, and I couldn't use my right. I couldn't use my left leg to get up because I'm left-handed I'm left-hand dominant.
Recorded weeks before the Dolphins released him, he said he looked down and saw his leg was crooked, and his first instinct was not panic, it was laughter.
And I was like, oh shit, I got a fucking party score, baby. So I immediately started laughing, man.
Instead of spiraling into the kind of despair that consumes most players in that moment, Hill said his mind went somewhere else entirely. He thought about the decade he had spent playing the game, the people who had supported him along the way, the time he had spent building his life in Miami. He said in that moment, lying on the field with his knee destroyed, everything came full circle.
My mom ran on the field, and I looked up and I'm like, how you get on the field? So, and my mom came and my grandma, she came and she kissed me.
His grandmother ran onto the field. He described looking up from the cart and seeing her face, bewildered by how she had made it past security. She kissed him and told him she was glad he was still smiling. That is a woman who raised him from childhood, who worked through hardship and never made excuses about the circumstances she was dealt. Hill referenced her repeatedly throughout the conversation, calling her his rock, describing kitchen memories, 50-year marriage anniversaries, and the values she instilled in him from the earliest age. When asked about the chatter, the media speculation that his career might be over, that a speed receiver over 30 with a multi-ligament knee reconstruction could not come back, Hill refused to give a definitive answer in either direction.
Well, at the end of the day, man, I feel like that decision is all based upon, how I feel and where my mindset is at the moment.
He said he was happy being with his kids, happy with the career he had already built, but he also acknowledged that playing at the level he demands of himself takes a toll, mentally and physically, and that the decision about his future would come when the time was right, after conversations with his family, not before. The controversies that shadowed the cheetah. The injuries told half the story. The other half lived in courtrooms, police reports, and divorce filings. Tyreek Hill's off-field history has followed him across every stop of his career, from college to Kansas City to Miami, and it added a volatile dimension to the Dolphins' decision that no one in the front office needed to say out loud. The timeline started on December 12, 2014, when Hill was arrested at Oklahoma State for domestic assault and battery by strangulation. He was accused of choking and punching his pregnant girlfriend, Crystal Espinal. He pleaded guilty in August 2015, was sentenced to 3 years of probation, completed anger management courses, and had the charges expunged by 2018 after fulfilling all terms. The conviction cratered his draft stock. He fell to the 5th round of the 2016 NFL Draft, where the Kansas City Chiefs selected him, one of the few organizations willing to absorb the reputational risk for the athletic upside. In March 2019, a child abuse investigation surfaced after Hill's 3-year-old son suffered a broken arm. No charges were filed against Hill, but the situation escalated dramatically when audio recordings between Hill and Espinal were leaked to the public. The recordings contained disturbing exchanges that prompted widespread media scrutiny and a wave of public backlash. The Chiefs placed Hill on a temporary suspension while they assessed the situation. The NFL conducted its own review and ultimately chose not to impose discipline, citing insufficient evidence to establish a violation. Hill won custody of his son and obtained a restraining order against Espinal. The incidents continued to accumulate after his move to Miami. In June 2023, Hill was involved in a marina altercation where he allegedly slapped an employee following a dispute about his boat. The matter was settled privately. No charges were filed. The NFL took no action. In February 2024, model Sophie Hall filed a lawsuit alleging Hill broke her leg during drills at his home. According to the complaint, Hill charged at Hall during an aggressive physical exercise at his residence, resulting in a leg fracture that required medical treatment. The civil suit remains ongoing with no criminal charges reported. Then came September 8, 2024, and a scene that played out live on camera outside Hard Rock Stadium, broadcast to millions and dissected by every sports media outlet in the country within hours. Hill was detained by Miami-Dade police for speeding and reckless driving while driving to the stadium before a game. Officers placed him in handcuffs on the side of the road. A verbal confrontation followed, with reports describing racial undertones to the exchange. Video footage showed the encounter in uncomfortable detail. The traffic citations were ultimately dismissed, and the officer involved was placed on administrative duty. Hill went on to score a touchdown that afternoon and celebrated by mimicking being placed in handcuffs. In April 2025, police responded to a domestic dispute at Hill's home. Reports described an argument, a thrown laptop, and a bruise noted in the police report. A 911 call captured someone saying, "I'm so scared." No charges were filed. The case was closed. The most damaging allegations arrived in September 2025, landing in the middle of the NFL season and immediately becoming the dominant storyline surrounding the franchise. Hill's estranged wife, Kita Vaccaro, filed divorce papers that contained claims of 8 separate domestic violence incidents spanning from January 2024 onward. The allegations, later detailed in unsealed court documents, described ripping her hair, throwing her to the ground, spitting on her, twisting intimate body parts, ripping a necklace from her neck causing cuts, throwing a phone at her, and a deflected punch aimed at her pregnant stomach. The details were graphic, specific, and laid out across a 17-month timeline that painted a deeply troubling picture. Hill denied every allegation. He called the claims a shakedown and a smear campaign, framing the divorce filings as financially motivated. The NFL launched an investigation under its personal conduct policy. However, no criminal charges have been filed in connection with the allegations till date. Analysts and commentators landed across the entire spectrum. Stephen A. Smith acknowledged Hill's off-field issues, but argued teams should still pursue his talent, suggesting the Chiefs should bring him back regardless of the baggage. On the other end, Jarrett Bailey pointed out on X that players like Calvin Ridley received far harsher punishments for lesser infractions, questioning the consistency of league discipline. USA Today's Nate Davis tied the accumulation of controversies directly to Hill's declining professional trajectory, writing that his complicated character had become inseparable from the football conversation. Anscape's Howard Bryant described the broader dynamic surrounding Hill as an uncomfortable reality. The tension between celebrating athletic achievement while grappling with the personal history of the person producing it. The Dolphins never publicly stated that off-field issues played a role in the release. They pointed to the failed physical and the cap savings, but the timing, amid unresolved allegations, an active NFL investigation, and a franchise desperate to redefine its culture under new leadership, suggested a calculation that extended well beyond spreadsheets and salary cap projections. When you are rebuilding an organization from the ground up, you are not just managing a salary cap, you are managing reputation, locker room dynamics, public perception, and the kind of foundation you want to build the next era upon. The Dolphins rebuild and Bradley Chubb's exit. Tyreek Hill's release commanded the headlines, but the Dolphins' overhaul ran far deeper than one player. This was a franchise confronting years of compounding financial overcommitment, persistent organizational instability, and a locker room culture that had been publicly questioned by players, coaches, analysts, and media outlets for the better part of 3 seasons. Bradley Chubb's release stood as the most strategically significant move alongside Hill's. The 2-time Pro Bowl edge rusher had been acquired from the Denver Broncos in a mid-2022 trade that cost the Dolphins a first-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and running back Chase Edmonds. Immediately after the trade, Chubb signed a 5-year, $110 million extension. The investment was staggering, premium draft capital, and elite-level money for a pass rusher the team hoped would anchor their defense for years to come. And for a stretch, the returns justified the gamble. In 2023, Chubb recorded 11 sacks and earned his second Pro Bowl selection, emerging as one of the league's most disruptive edge defenders. But then his body failed him in the cruelest possible fashion. In Week 17 of the 2023 season, Chubb suffered a devastating knee injury, torn ACL, meniscus, and patellar tendon, almost identical to the injury that would end Tyreek Hill's season 2 years later. Chubb missed the entire 2024 campaign, spending 12 months in rehabilitation, while the team he had been brought in to anchor stumbled without him. When he returned for 2025, he defied the skeptics by playing all 17 games for the first time in his professional career, recording 47 tackles, 8.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles, leading the team in sacks. But the numbers on his contract painted an unsustainable picture. Chubb carried a $31.2 million cap hit for 2026, none of it guaranteed. His $18.5 million base salary and $20.23 million in total cash, due for the year, made him one of the most obvious release candidates in the entire league. The savings amounted to $7.3 million if the release was processed before June 1st, or $20.2 million if designated as a post-June 1st transaction, which would spread spread the dead cap across the 2026 and 2027 seasons. As of February 18, 2026, Chubb had not issued any public response to the release. No statement on Instagram, no comment on X, no interview, no Twitch stream. This silence stood in sharp contrast to Hill's immediate and emotionally transparent public farewell. The other two releases told their own quieter stories about the nature of the rebuild. Guard James Daniels had signed a 3-year, $24 million deal in 2025, but missed most of the season with a pectoral injury, delivering almost no return on the investment. He had been brought in to stabilize the interior of an offensive line that had been leaking pressure all season, and he was unable to stay on the field long enough to fulfill that purpose. Wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, signed from the Tennessee Titans, contributed minimally to the offense and never carved out a consistent role. Both were textbook cap casualties, expensive bets that did not pay off, cleared from the books to make room for a future that would look entirely different from the roster that had just been dismantled. The combined cap savings from all 4 releases pushed the Dolphins from a position of financial distress to one of cautious functionality, though the road ahead remained steep. The broader context of the Dolphins organization made these moves feel less like isolated decisions and more like a controlled demolition of a structure that had been crumbling for years. This franchise carries a deep and turbulent history of controversy stretching back decades. The tampering scandal involving owner Stephen Ross, which resulted in a forfeited 2023 first-round pick and a 2024 third-round pick after impermissible contact with Tom Brady and Sean Payton, cost the franchise draft capital and front office credibility. The Bullygate scandal of 2013, in which offensive lineman Richie Incognito was found to have bullied teammate Jonathan Martin through racial slurs, threats, and sustained harassment, exposed a toxic locker room culture that became a national conversation about workplace abuse in professional sports. Brian Flores' 2022 lawsuit alleged racism, tanking incentives from Ross, and systemic organizational dysfunction. Each new coaching staff and front office promised a fresh start. Each cycle ended the same way. The 2024 and 2025 seasons crystallized the dysfunction into something impossible to ignore. Players received fines for lack of discipline, the kind of basic professional lapses that signaled a coaching staff losing control of the details. Tua Tagovailoa publicly criticized teammates for being late to meetings and missing player-only sessions, comments that were meant to convey accountability, but instead exposed the fractures within a locker room that was unraveling in real time. Tagovailoa later retracted the comments when the resulting media firestorm threatened to consume the entire locker room, acknowledging that he should have kept the issues internal. But the damage was done. The national narrative around the Dolphins shifted from underachieving contender to organizational mess, and it stuck. Hill addressed the situation on his podcast appearance, defending his quarterback while acknowledging the collateral damage of making internal business public. He acknowledged the frustration behind Tua's words, but he also understood the consequences of bringing locker room issues into the public sphere.
It creates a whole new chaos then. A whole new chaos. You got First Take talking about it. You got Cam Newton talking about it.
That chaos defined the final months of the Greer-McDaniel era. And now, with Sullivan and Hafley inheriting the rubble, the looming question of Tua Tagovailoa's future hangs over everything the franchise does next. Fan reactions and the league landscape. The reaction from the Dolphins fan base was immediate, vocal, and divided right down the middle. On one side stood supporters who had spent years watching cap mismanagement under Chris Grier metastasize into a roster that was simultaneously expensive and underperforming. These fans described the releases as a necessary purge, the kind of painful amputation that precedes real healing, the overdue acknowledgement that the franchise needed to strip everything back to its foundation and rebuild from the ground up. On the other side stood fans who mourned the departure of the most electrifying offensive weapon the franchise had employed in a generation, a player whose speed alone could alter the geometry of an entire defensive game plan, a player who made everyone around him faster simply by commanding the attention of safeties and cornerbacks on every single snap. The internal toxicity within the fan base itself became its own story. Blame ricocheted in every direction, at Tua for supposed leadership failures, at McDaniel for tactical shortcomings, at Grier for recklessly overpaying aging veterans, on contracts that handcuffed the salary cap for years. Some fans went as far as accusing new GM Sullivan of racial motivations in releasing black players, an extreme and unsubstantiated claim that nonetheless reflected how deeply the emotions surrounding these moves ran within the community. Others simply refused to renew season tickets, viewing the rebuild as an open admission that the franchise had squandered yet another competitive window without anything meaningful to show for it. Yet optimism persisted in certain pockets of the fan base, particularly among those who had been calling for a reset for years. Savvy fans embraced the teardown, viewing it as the first honest assessment of the roster that anyone in the organization had delivered in a long time. They pointed to the draft capital now available, including the 11th overall pick, the cap space that had been freed, and the opportunity to build around young, affordable talent rather than continuing to throw money at aging stars in decline. Across the rest of the league, the February offseason remained significantly quieter. No other team was conducting anything resembling the Dolphins' controlled demolition. The Denver Broncos released 4 depth players on February 3rd: safety Tanner McAllister, tight end Patrick Murta, and wide receivers Michael Bandy and Kyries Rowan. Each move was a standard roster trim with negligible cap impact, designed to clear space for the Broncos to retain their own pending free agents like pass rusher John Franklin Myers, who had recorded 14.5 sacks over 2 seasons and was a priority re-signing. The Los Angeles Rams similarly trimmed 3 players on February 3rd: offensive lineman Royce Newman, defensive end Laryl Murchison, and outside linebacker Jesse Luketa. All depth cuts for a team riding the momentum of Matthew Stafford's MVP caliber season and an NFC Championship appearance. With $59 million in available cap space, the Rams were fine-tuning their roster, not demolishing it. Season projections placed them at 12-5 or better, with legitimate aspirations of reaching the Super Bowl, while Stafford's window remains open. The Atlanta Falcons waived quarterback Emory Jones on February 17th, ending a 2-year stint in which he never appeared in a regular season game for the franchise. Jones had spent 2025 on injured reserve after a preseason concussion. The move was procedural, barely registering as a blip on the league's radar. Atlanta projects as an 8-9 team focused primarily on strengthening its defensive tackle position and building around its existing offensive core. The Green Bay Packers had already released cornerback Trevon Diggs back on January 20th, saving $15 million with no dead money attached. Diggs, a former All-Pro with the Dallas Cowboys who had been claimed off waivers late in 2025, managed only 34 snaps across 2 games, including a brief playoff appearance. Packers fans universally praised the move as sharp financial management, freeing cap space for a team projected at 13-4 and widely considered among the strongest Super Bowl contenders in the NFC. None of those moves carried the emotional weight, the roster implications, or the narrative magnitude of what happened in Miami. The Dolphins were the only franchise in the NFL conducting a genuine teardown, and the ripple effects of that decision reached well beyond their own building. Hill's entry into free agency sent the speculation machine into overdrive. Betting markets on Polymarket placed the Kansas City Chiefs at 43% to land Hill, fueled by the reunion narrative and the rehiring of Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator. A return to Kansas City would place Hill in a familiar system with familiar faces, though the role would likely be reduced, a complementary piece behind younger receivers like Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy rather than the focal point of the offense. The Buffalo Bills trailed closely at 42%, driven by Josh Allen's need for a legitimate deep threat who could stretch the field vertically and open up the intermediate routes that make Buffalo's offense most dangerous. The Los Angeles Chargers sat at 37%, offering cap space and a potential reunion with former Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel, who had been hired as their offensive coordinator after his firing from Miami, pairing Hill with Justin Herbert in a scheme designed to maximize exactly the kind of speed Hill brings. Other names surfaced in the rumor mill as well: the New England Patriots, who could pair Hill with young quarterback Drake May as they build their post-Super Bowl roster, and the Las Vegas Raiders, who had the financial flexibility and a rookie signal caller in Fernando Mendoza, who could benefit from having a proven veteran weapon to develop alongside. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.